because we are a city that is full of incredible and special people. Hi, welcome to a special edition of Block by Block with one of our national heroes. Dolores Huerta is with us today. In Albuquerque, we are here at the Hispanic Cultural Center celebrating Cesar Chavez and his legacy, and as well as, of course, Dolores's. And so, Dolores, thank you so much for coming back to Albuquerque, for being here with us on this special 25th anniversary of the Cesar Chavez Day March.
And I want to thank you, Mayor. I think Albuquerque is the only city, and I could be wrong about that, but I think that Albuquerque is the only city that actually pays for the celebration for Cesar Chavez Day. In most communities, including Delano, California, where the farm worker movement started, it's usually the community and the union itself or supporters that actually pay for the celebration. And I have to say that I've been to many celebrations all over the country, and this has got to be one of the best.
Wow, well, thank you so much, and extra special to have you here. I know you've been to a few of these, actually. I saw you last year, and that you spend a lot of time also here in New Mexico. I wondered if you might share with us, just from a personal note, I believe you are from northern New Mexico. Why don't you share with our community a little bit about your story growing up here?
Well, I was very fortunate to be born in New Mexico. I always like to brag about that, because I like to say that everybody should come to New Mexico to get humanized. You know, because here when you come to New Mexico, you just have this great spirit of friendliness and companionship and service. So it's a wonderful, beautiful state. And I was very fortunate that both of my grandparents were born here. On my mother's side of the family, my grandfather was born in Carrizozo. My mother and my father were both born in Dawson, New Mexico, and I was born there. Wow. My grandmother, Clarita St. John, was born in Las Cruces.
Huh. You spanned the whole state.
Yeah, so my grandpa was Herculano Chavez, and he was also born here, so we're really lucky.
Wow, a wonderful product of New Mexico. Very special, and I know Dawson, for our listeners out there and viewers, was actually a very large city up by Eagle's Nest and Cimarron in that area, and I think there's still there's still an alumni network, so to speak, of Dawson folks around New Mexico, and it was a very large city and then kind of suddenly closed down. So it has its own unique story.
Well, yeah, it was a mining town. It was a mining town, and there's a graveyard there where two of my uncles are buried there that were killed in a mine explosion, in a coal mine explosion. And then my grandfather's also buried there. So,
wow.
And they have a Dawson reunion celebration every other year, and I've gone to that, and people come all the way from England, they come from New York, they come from all over the country. I guess it was such a special place. I think it was the largest coal mining town in the United States of America at one point.
Wow, very special. Well, tell us a little bit about how then, from that environment and growing up in New Mexico, you got involved eventually in all of the historic work in terms of farm workers. What was the sort of bridge that got you into that kind of work?
Well, actually, my parents divorced, and my mother took us to California. We were living in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and then we went to California. And I grew up in a city called Stockton, which is close to Sacramento, the capital of California, and got involved there with a group called the Community Service Organization that was actually started by Ed Roybal. And Eduardo Roybal, who lived in Los Angeles, and his family came from New Mexico also.
Wow.
And Patricia Roybal, Caballero, who we know is one of your legislators here, that was actually her I believe, second cousin.
Wow, I never knew that connection.
And it was interesting because, and I love to say this because I think New Mexico has always had this culture of voting. And so Ed Roybal, when he was in Los Angeles, he was a veteran of World War II, and they decided to start organizing the Latinos in Los Angeles. And so he became the first city councilman in Los Angeles of Latino, to be a Latino, and the first Latino congressman from California to the U.S. Congress. So you can see that this New Mexico seeds really, they really go a long, long way.
It's so true. They say in northern New Mexico too, voting is a sport, and we're good at it.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember hearing all my relatives talk about, they would get these fierce discussions and debates about candidates and about voting. And my father was actually in the state legislature also.
Oh, that's right. I remember reading about that. And, our legislature, I once upon a time served in the state senate, and it's like a PhD in all things New Mexico. And you learn even in how in that building in the Roundhouse, so much of our history is still alive and still reflected in the attitudes and the voting patterns of folks from different parts of the state. And so next time actually we're in the Roundhouse, they have pictures up from every class year. And so we'll have to look up your family, and I'm sure it's up there.
I think my dad actually, he was expelled from the legislature. My dad was Juan Fernandez, and he actually was expelled because he punched out Jose Montoya. Because Jose Montoya was a cotton grower, and my dad was a labor organizer, and he was a volunteer organizer for the Mine Workers Union, for the United Mine Workers, and he was a kind of hot temper. So I hope that they put him back in.
That's good. We actually should. Let's talk to our lawmakers about that.
So that would be 1938. That was the year he was.
Wow. What a great part of our New Mexico history. Well, I'm sure he deserved it, the gentleman who got punched.
Oh, I think some of the relatives probably would not agree.
That's true. We're going to rekindle an old rivalry here if we keep talking about this. Well, tell us now about your efforts in fast forward to, our sort of current era and what's going on nationally. Tell us what all you're up to.
Well, I'm the president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation, and we are back to grassroots organizing, going into communities, hiring and training organizers to teach people that they have power. And they go into those communities, and we do a lot of house meetings, and then we bring people together. Then they have to decide what things they want to improve in their community. They have to check their priorities, and then they decide which one they're going to work on. And then we make an action plan. And then they have to volunteer to do the work. And this is a way that we get the leadership that comes out of these communities, and you never know who it's going to be. And so they do amazing things. I mean, in our work that we've been doing, we have many areas where they didn't have sidewalks, streets, gutters, sewers, street lights, swimming pools, and neighborhood parks, and now we have them. But the people themselves are the ones that work to make this happen. And we have one group that actually got a brand new gymnasium built for their middle school just by passing petitions and passing a bond issue. And then we do the political work, civic engagement work. In fact, we just won 2 redistricting lawsuits, one against our board of supervisors to get more Latino representation, and one against our current high school district.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and so we're going to go up the Central Valley of California. The Central Valley of California is very conservative. It's something like Midland, Texas, like that area up there. And so, we organize it. We're in like 10 different school districts, and we organize the parents. And our first, effort that we did with the current high school district, we had 155 parents that actually got together. And so this is the way we do. We get everybody together and then teach them how to do the things that they have to do to change their communities, to improve them.
It's so empowering and something we need everywhere. I think even right here in Albuquerque. And we have a program that for the first time in our city's history, we actually were able to pass into legislation that we're going to divide up the capital investment money through an equity lens. That's one of the criteria that I'm going to use in terms of where we fix sidewalks, where we build pools, the things that you were talking about. So it's a great opportunity for our community to actually have a say, and that's the kind of organizing that is so important all around the country, but also an opportunity right here in Albuquerque for folks to say, you know what, a lot of our underserved communities of color that have been neglected over the last 20 years when it comes to built environment, now it's our turn to actually change that and go back and invest like we should have done before in all of those infrastructure things that matter, especially for our children and our families.
Yeah, and think when you get the community members involved in that, they own it. You know, and like we have our youth group, they've done many murals over graffiti, and once they do these murals, nobody touches the murals, you know, because they know that it's theirs. It's the young people that invested in creating those murals, and I think that's really what you call democracy in action. You know, when you have people that are the ones that get out there and they do the work.
Well, thank you for inspiring and reinvigorating those neighborhoods to do that, and I hope that we can have some of that right here in Albuquerque. And if you look around when you're in town, we have actually a very good mural program that is run by students, and they get together through Working Classroom as one of the entities and others. But what you're saying is so true. Those murals last, 10, 15 years, and people respect them. They're pride points to the community. And so now, as we think about moving from like your neighborhood level to other issues that affect all our families and that are happening in, whether it's DC or state capitals, what are some of the things that you're particularly paying attention to right now?
Well, I think like everybody, we're all worried about what's happening with the DACA program, our immigrant program. A lot of our places that we organize, that people are immigrants, they're farm workers, and everybody's really concerned about, what the Trump administration is doing on the deportations. We know that there's a move to replace all of the local farm workers with the foreign worker program, the H-2A agricultural worker program, and we know that's going to be very devastating, especially to farm workers' wages. So this is one of our concerns. I think all of us have to worry about what's going to happen with the census, because we know that this administration is trying to, put in that question about citizenship, and a lot of people are going to not want to be identified. And we know that that's going to be devastating, especially for the Southwest, because the people that get counted, the money that we get, resources that we get for our communities, depends on how many people are counted. And if a lot of people are afraid to come forward and be counted, that's going to be a big loss of revenue, of money to all of our communities. So we have to start working on, I think, building a huge volunteer network, to make sure that we can count everybody in our communities. And so, because I think that the census is also not going to give us much funding to be able to do the counting. And I like to use the word volunteer, because when I was talking about the work that we do, and the work that needs to be done, you're never going to have enough money to pay people to do all this work. So we really have to call upon people to volunteer to make sure that we get the benefits that we deserve in our communities, but it's not going to happen unless we do the work.
Well, that is a good message for folks, because, with all of the language about hate and division that's coming from, I think, DC and other parts of our country, it makes people afraid to engage in government activities. Maybe it's because they have family members who might be at risk, or maybe they might be themselves. But it's so important to remember that, for as much as we can in that census process, we have to engage in that, because that is how we actually get those dollars to the communities who needs it. And so I do feel that it's such an important issue, and I'm glad you're working on it. And it's one of those where no matter how you feel, even if you have values that are different than perhaps mine or yours, it's good, for example, for Albuquerque to get every federal dollar we can get. And so we want every single person who lives here to make sure and do that. It really is something that's important for the long run. And as you mentioned earlier, with respect, that's how redistricting is done. There's a whole lot that comes out of that. And so it's something we'll be sure and try and help at the city. But we want to know, we hope that in our community, people will feel not afraid to engage, at least with city government. And of course, that's why we're committed to an immigrant-friendly city and trying to stand up, I think, against a lot of the attitudes that we see coming from other places that try and impose themselves on a community right here, like many of your communities, where we have been multicultural and diverse from before even statehood. And so for us, it's about being true to ourselves. And that's what I hope we can reflect at City Hall.
And we're also concentrating on voting. And in California, we have been really fortunate, because we have passed some really strong measures, and one of them is to tax our millionaires. And we passed an initiative, and as a result of that initiative, we've been getting $9 billion a year.
Wow.
And this has been going on for several years now. And you know, when Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor of California, he left us with a $14 billion debt. But now I'm happy to say that with our current governor, Jerry Brown, that we are now in the black. And not only that, but we're getting additional funding. And so this is really great, because if you're a millionaire in California, you have to pay 3% more in state taxes. If you make $500,000, you pay 2%, and if you make $250,000, you pay 1% more. But that has really helped our state in terms of, you know, getting money for our funding, especially for education and for health services. And so, you know, we're doing a lot of work on making sure people register to vote, and that they will, and especially 2018, because we were saying that this is such a crucial election year, and we're just asking everybody, please get involved. And it's not enough to vote. We're saying to people, you've got to get involved in campaigning. We want you to volunteer for a campaign for a progressive candidate. And I like to say we're going to build our own wall. We're going to have our own wall in the U.S. Congress, and it's going to be a progressive Congress people to make sure that we can stop all of the negative stuff that's coming out of the White House.
Oh, I like that. That is such a good counter narrative in terms of a wall. You mentioned this voter engagement, and I'm curious, how do you actually get some traction with the millennial generation and folks? You know, a lot of people, I appreciate it when they tell me that I'm young. It makes me feel great. But being 40, I'm too old to be a millennial by a long shot. And so how have you found engaging with that community and invigorating them to actually participate in our democracy in the way you outlined?
Well, we know that the millennials are very involved in the environment, for one thing. And I think just getting everybody to understand that we can march, we can protest, but if we don't vote, if we don't elect people that are going to make the policies, you know, and change the laws, that it doesn't change. You know, we can march as much as we want, and we can protest, but if we do not have people that are going to, you know, make those decisions for us, the decision makers, the deciders, then nothing changes. We can march till the moon turns to cheese, you know.
That's right.
But it's not going to change anything. We got to make sure that we vote.
Now, thinking a little bit about our workforce and our young people, but also something you mentioned before around what's happening with the worker visas and so forth. You know, in New Mexico, we obviously, as you remember, we love our red and green chili and so forth. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that this is very important for our economy. There's, I think it's $30 million a year that immigrants put into our economy, even in terms of straight tax revenue. And they also play a huge role, even to migrant labor, in our green chili production and things of this nature. From a standpoint of not only sort of social justice and values and respecting those individuals and the dignity of the work that they put in, but tell us how you connect that with the economy. So when everyday people are, whether they're eating or shopping and so forth, why is this something they should care about?
Well, definitely they should care about that. And the problem with when they bring in these foreign workers, these contract workers, these workers are not covered with, well, in California, unemployment insurance. Here, farm workers don't have unemployment insurance. In California, they do, but they're not covered by Social Security. No, they're not. They often don't pay them even minimum wage, so that they can contribute to the economy here. I mean, that it takes away all of these farm workers that currently contribute to the New Mexico economy when they are deported. You know, and then the other people that are brought in, which is kind of the same people, but they don't have any benefits, they don't have any rights. It definitely takes away from the economy. It definitely does, because the local people, whatever earnings they have, they spend it. You know, you don't have farm workers buying stocks and bonds with their money.
Right. Yeah.
Everything that they earn, they spend it here in the local economy. So it is a devastation.
Very well put. Tell us about what you're looking forward to in the next few years in terms of not only building that alternative wall that you mentioned, but what else? Where else can we have impact as a community on our future going forward?
Well, we have so many needs, as we know, in the Latino community. So you might say that we don't have a shortage of needs, of things that need to be, you know, corrected. But at the same time, I think we have to be thinking of the bigger picture. We have to be thinking of our environment. environment, of our global environment, that we have so much work to do there to make sure that we can conserve and preserve our planet. A lot of it has to do with education, and I keep saying that we have to change the content of our educational system. We have a good educational system, but we have to change the content, and we have to include the contributions of Native Americans, who were the first slaves, African slaves who built the White House and the Congress, and Montebello, where Thomas Jefferson did all of his great work. And he could do this because he didn't have to do the work. The slaves did the work, right?
Yeah.
And the contribution of the Mexicans and the Asians and all of the people who built the United States of America. And we have to do that so we can end the racism. And we have to end the misogyny and the homophobia, all of these things that we have to change. I think we're at a critical point in our society when we realize that if we do not have an educated society, then the greedy and the powerful will rule. And we're at that point right now. And I do believe that we have, back in the 60s, we had a cultural revolution. But I think the revolution that we're stepping into now is going to be an economic revolution, because we have to, number one, sustain our planet, with the environment, but we also have to sustain the people that live in the planet by making sure that everybody has a living wage, that people can afford shelter. When we think of our homeless problem, how can we possibly look at ourselves in the mirror to know that there are people out there sleeping on the streets that don't have any shelter because they can't afford to pay the high rents, And we know that this is a problem everywhere. It's a problem here in New Mexico.
Absolutely.
Where the rents keep rising and people can't afford to live. So we have a lot of challenges, but I think that we're also up to the challenges. But we've got to get good people like yourself elected to office, so we can make sure that we have people that are in power that have the courage to make these decisions. And to also decide where our resources are going to be going, our tax dollars. Are they going to go for more jails or for more schools? So
well put.
We have a lot of work to do.
Well, I think that's probably a good way to wrap things up on. And I just want to say thank you and for in sharing with us what you just shared, but also I think outlining in such a way the challenges that we're facing, but also that path forward when we think about if we own up to who we are and our own history and our own heritage, regardless of where we came from. That American dream is a rich and diverse tapestry, and it's also built on lifting each other up, not just success of a few. And that's something that we've got a long way to go on that. But I think if there's anything that might be a positive outcome of what's happening now, it's that people are awakening and they're starting to hear that message that you just delivered.
Absolutely.
And that, I think, gives me hope for America, New Mexico, and Albuquerque.
Thank you. And I think when people see how hurtful and harmful racism is,
yes,
and homophobia against our LGBT community, and against women, and it's great that we have these movements now, like the Me Too movement, the It's Time movement, Black Lives Matter, Brown Lives Matter. All of these movements are so important, but because they are calling everyone to attention, that these are the things that we have to address. And I think that we are up to it. I think we can make it happen.
Yeah, and if you're driving around town here, people will see these. You might notice some green signs in front of people's houses, and they articulate about, I think there's 7 principles on there, and it just ends with, this notion of, in this house, love is everything, and then it talks about LGBT respect, and it talks about Black Lives Matters, and the environment and water, and you notice those when you're driving around Albuquerque. It's something really special that's been happening around town, and I think people are proud to display that, including even in front of our own house.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad for that. And then also many signs that say immigrants are welcome.
And that's one of the credos on there. Yeah, in fact, we'll try and get you one of those.
Okay, and we should also don't forget to vote.
That's right, absolutely.
I have to share with you that I saw Michael Moore, the documentary filmmaker. I saw him on Broadway, and he said, when you get up in the morning, there's 3 things you have to do. You have to wash your face, brush your teeth, and call your congressperson.
That would change the world right there. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for tuning in with us here with one of our own American heroes, Dolores Huerta, and a wonderful daughter of New Mexico. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you.
Because we are a city that is full of incredible and special people.